Welcome to Thread of Terror. We bring you the creepiest stories from Reddit. Dim the lights, grab a blanket, and hit subscribe so you never miss a scare. Have you ever had a paranormal experience? Tell me about it. Story 1. Something took my mother's place.
When I was 7 years old, I visited my mother's hometown, a quiet place with an old 2-story house where many of our relatives lived. One night, around 9 o'clock in the evening, my mother laid out a carpet and 2 pillows outside on the extended roof of the lower floor. It was a safe place, with high walls and locked gates, perfect for sleeping under the stars while enjoying the fresh air. I remember lying beside her, watching the night sky, the gentle breeze lulling me to sleep. At some point during the night, I woke up. The air felt colder than before, and an eerie silence surrounded me. As my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight, I realized something was wrong. I was alone. The carpet, the pillows, and most terrifyingly, my mother were all gone. It was as if they had never been there at all. My heart pounded as I looked around, confused and frightened. The house was completely silent, the windows dark, as if the entire world had fallen into a deep slumber, leaving me behind. Panicking, I rushed to the door leading inside, only to find it locked from the inside. That did not make sense. How could I be locked out? My hands trembled as I knocked softly at first, then harder. My grandfather's room was the closest to the door, and after what felt like an eternity, I heard his footsteps approaching. The door creaked open, revealing my grandfather's concerned face. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, his voice groggy with sleep. I did not answer his question. Instead, I frantically asked, "Where is Mom?" "She has been sleeping on the couch since 9 o'clock, he said. My breath hitched. That was impossible. I was impossible. She was with me. She laid down the carpet, placed the pillows and lay beside me. Yet, according to my grandfather, she had never left the living room. Overwhelmed with fear, I stayed in his room for the rest of the night, unable to sleep. The next morning, I confronted my mother. "Why did you leave me outside?" I asked. She looked at me, confused. "I thought you were upstairs, sleeping with your cousins," she said. A cold chill ran down my spine. If she had never been outside with me, then who was? And how did I end up there alone?
Story 2. None that prayed with me.
A friend of mine, whom we will call Jess, attended a Catholic school during high school and experienced many paranormal encounters. However, the one that unsettled her the most was this. One night, nearly everyone had left, but she and her classmates remained, practicing for an upcoming event. It was late when she decided to go to the restroom. The restroom had 3 stalls and no door, allowing a clear view of anyone passing by outside. Jess finished using the stall and moved to the sink to wash her hands. As she stood there, an unnatural chill settled into the air, colder than she had ever felt inside the building. An uneasy feeling crept over her, but she dismissed it as a sudden draft. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed something at the doorway. A nun stood there, her clothes stained with what looked like blood, clutching a rosary in both hands. The figure slowly stepped forward. Jess froze, paralyzed with fear. Every instinct told her to run, but her legs would not move. The only thing she could think to do was pray. Desperately, she began reciting the words of the Hail Mary, hoping it would make the figure disappear. But then, as she reached the middle of the prayer, the nun opened its mouth and began praying with her, its voice distorted and inhuman, echoing each word she spoke. Terror consumed Jess. If the entity could pray with her rather than retreat, she knew she was truly powerless. The realization was too much to bear. Darkness overtook her, and she collapsed to the floor, 30 minutes later, she awoke to a classmate shaking her, asking if she was all right. The restroom was empty. The icy air was gone. She never spoke of that night at school again.
Story 3. The Amethyst Curse.
I have never shared this publicly, and to this day, my boyfriend and I rarely talk about it. It is simply too unbelievable, even for us. It happened in early 2016. My friends and I had gone to a concert, nothing unusual, just a fun night out. When we got back, one of our friends pulled out a collection of crystals and stones to show us. Among them was a large amethyst crystal, over 300 years old, passed down through his family for generations. One of the girls reached out to touch it, and the moment it met her fingers, everything changed. Her eyes darkened, pupils so dilated that they swallowed the color entirely. A sneer crept across her face. Then she started speaking backwards. 2 people suddenly became violently ill, vomiting almost instantly. She stood up and began saying unsettling things, speaking about hidden betrayals within our group, secrets she should not have known. At the same time, doors slammed shut on their own, objects shifted, shadows danced where there should have been none. Terrified, a few of us retreated upstairs. While trying to process what was happening, one of our friends muttered, "She is acting crazy." The second he said it, a massive chunk of ice crashed down from the roof, shattering his windshield. Later that night, my boyfriend and I refused to sleep near her. From downstairs we heard metal scraping, fingers tapping, hysterical crying, then laughter, and then something else. Checking his phone, my boyfriend gasped. The girl had just posted on social media the message, "Congratulations, you have awoken the dragon." As we read those words, we heard heavy, padded footsteps slowly ascending the stairs, like something massive crawling towards us. Heart pounding, we peered over the edge. Nothing was there. By morning, the girl was gone. The doors, cabinets, even the basement, everything was left open. We found strange relics in the basement later. To this day, I do not know what we encountered that night. Was it possession, black magic, or something even worse? All I know is, I never want to experience it again.
Story 4. Something was watching me.
It happened about a year ago, one of the most terrifying nights of my life. 3 separate paranormal encounters, all in a single day. The first incident was in the afternoon. I was sitting on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, when I heard it, someone whispering my name right next to my ear. A cold breath brushed against my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. I froze, barely able to breathe. There was no one else in the room. That night, I decided to sleep in my mother's room while she was away. I turned off the light, pulled the blanket up to my chest, and shut my eyes until an overwhelming feeling of being watched consumed me. My mind conjured an image of what it looked like, though I was too afraid to open my eyes. It was tall, towering over the bed, its limbs impossibly long. Its silhouette resembled something unnatural, something monstrous. I could feel it standing there, staring, panicked. I jumped out of bed and rushed to my own room, where my sister and our pets were. I finally felt a small sense of safety, until the doorknob rattled. It was as if small, unseen hands were desperately trying to turn it. My sister, a skeptic, sat up immediately, her face pale. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Every door and window was locked. No one else was home. This was not the first time strange things happened in our house. Objects moved by themselves. Whispers echoed through empty rooms, and long before I was born, the shower had once turned on by itself. To this day, I cannot shake the feeling that someone is still following me, watching, waiting.
Story 5. The room no one would sleep in.
When I was 10 years old, my parents separated. I spent alternate weeks with my father at his apartment and my mother at their former home. Eventually, my father and stepmother purchased a villa from the 1980s. At first, I was thrilled. I was given the nicest room, complete with a small balcony and an adjacent storage space for my toys. The excitement, however, did not last. A deep sense of unease settled over me every time I stayed there. The air felt heavy, and an unnatural silence filled the room at night. I would wake my father almost every evening, begging to sleep on a mattress in their room because something about my own felt wrong. One night, I awoke to find a dark silhouette standing across the room. It was motionless, yet I could feel its gaze locked onto me. My breath hitched, my mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Summoning every ounce of courage, I reached for my nightlight and switched it on. The bulb flickered violently as if something was resisting its glow. I bolted from the room without looking back. Objects moved on their own after that night. Doors creaked open without reason, small things would be misplaced, and shadows seemed to shift in the corners of my vision. I never slept with the lights off again. A few years later, I changed rooms, and my old one became a guest room. Whenever visitors stayed over, I would casually offer them a choice, my old room on the right or the one on the left. Not a single person ever chose the right. One day my cousin moved in temporarily. My father jokingly told him to take my old room. He agreed. Months later I ran into him and asked, "So, how is the ghost room treating you?" His expression darkened. I knew it. That room is haunted, isn't it? Whatever lurked there, it was not just my imagination. Others felt it too. To this day, I wonder who or what still resides in that room.
Story 6. The man at the foot of my bed.
It was a Thursday afternoon when I arrived home from school, exhausted. I was only 11 years old at the time, and my family had always emphasized independence. We were taught to look after one another and never open the door unless it was family. That evening I went straight to my room and fell asleep. My older brother, 16 years old, was returning from a rugby trip that night at around 9 o'clock, and my mother, who was 36, would not be home until after 10. I awoke sometime later to an eerie stillness. The house was shrouded in darkness, a deep shade of grey-blue, almost suffocating. My breath hitched as I realized there was a man standing at the foot of my bed. He was completely still, staring at me, his breathing slow and heavy, deliberate, as if savoring the moment. It felt like I was trapped in a tunnel of time, forced to listen to each breath. My instinct screamed at me to stay still, to ignore him. But then I felt it, warm breath against my ear, and a woman's voice whispered, "Look." An uncontrollable force made me turn my head toward the voice. The moment I did, an unbearable dread consumed me. I snapped my gaze back to the man, and then he moved. His body lunged forward in an instant, his mouth stretching unnaturally wide as he let out a bone-chilling scream. His hands reached for my throat. I tried to scream, but terror had stolen my voice. My dog, sensing the danger, broke free from his chain outside. A deafening crash erupted as he tore through the back door, barking and snarling with unrelenting fury. My bedroom door slammed shut on its own, with a force that shook the walls. Before I could react, ice-cold hands clamped over my mouth, pinning me down. My vision blurred. I felt my strength draining. Then salvation arrived. My brother and uncle burst through the door, my dog at their heels, his teeth bared. My uncle spoke in a commanding voice, uttering words I did not understand. The presence vanished. The room fell silent. I am 21 years old now, and I have never seen anything like that again. I have never been possessed, but I will never forget the night I was told to look.
Story 7. The last recording.
The first sound from the tape is Emmy's voice, shaky, uncertain. "Is it still out there?" she asks. Either Timothy had told her to turn the camera on, or she did it instinctively, though the latter seems unlikely. The attack was already underway when the recording began. The next sound is Timothy's voice, raw with desperation. "Get out here. I am getting killed out here." His remote microphone attached to his coveralls captures everything. The tent zipper rips open. The storm outside howls, rain pelting the fabric, wind screeching. Ami's voice rises in terror. "Play dead." Seconds pass before she repeats, "Play dead." Her voice cracks. It seems to work. The bear hesitates, its focus shifting. A pause. Only the storm and Timothy's ragged breathing remain. Amy moves toward him, trying to assess his injuries. But then a sound, low, guttural. The bear is back. Timothy's voice is urgent now. "Playing dead is not working. Hit the bear." The storm muffles the chaos, but Amy's voice cuts through. "Fight back." A desperate plea, a metallic clang like a frying pan striking something solid. The bear snarls. Timothy moans in agony. The bear's grip shifts from his head to his leg. Then a scream. Amy's voice shrill, primal. "Stop. Go away." The storm rages. The bear does not. Timothy knows. His voice weakens. "Amy, get away. Go away." He does not beg for himself. He begs for her life, but she does not leave. The recording lasts 6 minutes. Timothy's pleas fill 2/3 of it. The bear is nearly silent. Only deep grunts and heavy breathing, then dragging sounds. Timothy's screams fade into the darkness, and then Amy's final piercing cry, high-pitched, desperate, the kind of sound that lures predators closer, then silence.
Story 8. The silent tenants.
We lived in a quiet apartment complex in Sacramento, California. One afternoon, I overheard my husband speaking with a new couple who had just moved into the apartment above ours. Curious, I went out to greet them. They were friendly and polite, just like the neighbors across the way, who came to welcome them as well. We all chatted briefly, and then they disappeared upstairs. "At least they're quiet," I thought to myself, pleased to have peaceful neighbors. I couldn't hear a sound after they went in. This wasn't the case when we first moved in. The previous tenants, a mother and 2 teenage sons, were so loud at times, it felt like they might come crashing through the ceiling. Later that day, we went to the manager's office to pay our rent and casually mentioned the new tenants. To our surprise, the manager seemed confused. She said the apartment hadn't been rented. My husband and I exchanged uneasy glances. These weren't squatters. They looked too clean and composed. Why would they let themselves be seen? A few hours later, the maintenance man arrived with a couple of police officers. They went upstairs to investigate. When they returned, they reported no sign of anyone living there. In fact, no one had seen the couple leave. Over the next few days, we began to hear footsteps in the apartment above us. It wasn't the usual creaks. These steps were heavy, deliberate. Then, I started waking up with strange scratches on my body. At first, I thought it was the cat, but one night, something far more sinister happened. As I lay in bed, I felt what seemed like a white-hot garden claw run down my leg. I opened my eyes in time to watch 3 deep scratches form on my skin, from my knee to my ankle. That's when I remembered. Before we moved here from Omaha, there had been a murder-suicide in this very apartment. As I looked at old newspaper articles in the library, I froze. The faces staring back at me were the same couple who had moved in upstairs. They were dead, and their restless spirits were still haunting the apartment.
Story 9. Unseen spirits.
We moved into an old house in 2008. The house had been built by an elderly couple in the 1920s or 1930s, and they lived there until their passing in the early 2000s. The son, who had spent years renovating the property, rented it out to us, and we became the first family to live there in many years. It didn't take long before we noticed something strange about the house. Almost every day we experienced unsettling occurrences, shadowy figures lurking in the corners of our eyes, the constant sound of doorknobs rattling, and footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. At night, the heavy scent of cigarettes would fill the air, only to be followed by the sweet fragrance of perfume. It was as if someone or something was watching us. But two experiences stand out above all the others. One evening I was taking a shower, and as usual I cracked open the bathroom window for some fresh air. To my shock, the window suddenly slammed shut and latched itself. I thought my girlfriend had done it, but when I opened the shower curtain I was alone. The door was still closed and no one was there. I had no explanation. The second incident was far more terrifying. My girlfriend and I were sitting on the couch late one night watching television. From the corner of my eye, I saw the laundry room door handle begin to jiggle. Then the door slowly creaked open, swinging about 2 feet before slamming shut with a loud click. It locked itself. We stared at each other, horrified. I ran to the door thinking someone had broken in, but when I checked, the door to the garage was locked from the inside. All the doors were secure, yet the unexplainable still hung in the air like a suffocating fog. That night, after I calmed my girlfriend down, we both realized something chilling. We had experienced the same thing, and when I searched through old newspapers, I found an article about a murder-suicide that had taken place in that very house, involving a couple, the same couple we had seen in the house before.
Story 10. The Shape in the Dark.
For about a year, I've been wrestling with something that might be sleep paralysis, or maybe it's a real demon or entity trying to torment me. It started with a strange feeling. I would wake up in the middle of the night, not frozen but completely pinned down. This continued after I had been feeling something or someone sitting at the edge of my bed for a few weeks. Sometimes it even felt like something was crawling into bed next to me. I read that this is a common occurrence and nothing to be concerned about. But what happened next was different. Every time it happened, I could feel the pressure tightening around me, as if something invisible was holding me down. I couldn't scream, and I could barely breathe. So I began mentally reciting the Our Father prayer, hoping it would help. The grip would usually grow tighter the more I prayed, and I'd be jolted violently. But eventually, after repeating the prayer 10 times, it would leave. At least I thought it would. I kept my eyes tightly shut under the covers, refusing to face whatever it was. I refused to see it, until one night, I couldn't help myself. As I recited the prayer, a black shape began to materialize in the room, standing near my bed. It was humanoid in shape, but something about it felt wrong. The outline seemed almost feminine, but it radiated a terrible malevolence. I tried to keep my composure, but then it happened. It slammed my arm back down when I attempted to raise it. That's when I knew it wasn't just sleep paralysis. Something was definitely messing with me. I could feel its power, its anger. The thing left shortly after, but the terror hasn't gone away. I built and bought this house myself, so there's no history of violence or strange happenings. If this is just sleep paralysis, it's beyond terrifying. But if it's something paranormal, I have no idea why it's happening.
Thanks for joining us on this terrifying adventure. If tonight's story gave you chills, let us know in the comments below and share your own scary experiences too. Don't forget to leave a like if you want more nightmares and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, sleep tight and remember, not all shadows are empty.